Building a Snowflake native application from the scratch has always been an interesting and exciting process. If you have been following this channel and if you have been building along with me, you will definitely agree to this fact. However, debugging a native application during the process of building is often tricky. In the previous few tutorials of this series, I really did not touch upon this particular concept of debugging a native application. My dear developer friends, this is going to be the topic for the day. We are going to talk about the many different ways in which you can debug or troubleshoot a native application. Welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to this exclusive series on Snowflake native applications. Before we dive on to the presentation, a quick disclaimer. Any ideas which are expressed as a part of this particular series are absolutely mine and they have nothing to do with my employer. And finally, a kind request to you to subscribe to this channel if you have not done already. And if you like this kind of concepts, you know what to do. Just hit the like button. See you on the presentation screen. Here we are on the presentation screen. I've put together a couple of slides to talk about the different concepts before we hit VS Code and Snowsite. As a convention, I generally follow this. I prefer talking about the theory for the first 2 to 3 minutes before we head on to the live hands-on example. This particular video is no exception. On the screen, you see that I am speaking about two application modes. One is the development mode and the other one is the debugging mode. Let's go through the point one by one. For your reference, all this information which you see on the screen have been taken from the documentation. When you create an application from an application package, either by specifying a version or a patch, or maybe directly from the application files which are stored in the application stage, the application is considered to be in the development mode. Now, in a production scenario, a native application is supposed to run on your consumer environment. However, you may need to run it in your provider environment as well, because that is where you can debug it. That is where you can play around with the different options so that you are 100% sure that your native application will work flawlessly once deployed on your consumer account. This process enables you to quickly test the changes to the script and your application logic. The second mode is your debug mode. Now, the debug mode allows you to view and modify all the objects which are there in your application. In general, when the application is deployed on the consumer account, you as a provider do not have complete control over it. You may not be able to see all the changes that your application is making during the process of execution. And that is why the debug mode is so important. Using an application in debug mode requires some of the following steps. Number one, the application must be created in the development mode, because if an application is not in a development mode, debug mode cannot be switched on. And once you create an application in a development mode, you can actually switch between the development mode and the debug mode from Snowsite using a particular command, and we will see all of it in action. At this point of time, if things are a little gray, which I believe they are, please hold on. I'm going to make everything clear once we do the hands-on. The next topic during a troubleshooting exercise is logging. Now, if you have been a pro developer, you understand the importance of logging. Logging messages and tracing events are some of the fundamental things that a developer always looks for. Snowflake has onboarded a concept called a Snowflake event table, which helps you do that. You can write your stored procedures, you can write your functions, you can write your UDTFs, which are user defined table functions, and you can enable logging from these Snowflake objects, and the logs are going to be stored in your event tables. An event table has the following characteristics. An event table is a set of predefined columns for capturing log entries. The table structures include the columns and the key value attribute object definitions, which hold the predefined data and the data you design. You can associate an account with only one event table at any point of time. Now, as a developer, you can build multiple event tables. However, there can be only one event table at any point of time, and that event table is called the active event table. You can also specify the severity of the log messages and the verbosity of your traces that you want to capture. Well, this works absolutely fine on your provider account. However, if your logs are getting captured on your consumer account, how do you bring it back to the provider account is the question. Let's see how you can bring them back. There are a few steps which enables you to bring back or share events which are logged in your consumer account to your provider account for the provider to get a better understanding of the app when it is getting executed on your consumer account. For that, you will have to do a few account level changes. Now on the screen, the steps are highlighted. However, I'm not going to get into the details because it becomes a little confusing if I start talking too much of theory. We will see all of these in action once we hit VS Code, and we will go line by line and understand the process in detail. Let's head over to VS Code. We are on VS Code. On the screen, you see all the code units that I have been using for the previous tutorials. Now, all these code units have already been clubbed together and uploaded to a GitHub repository. The link of the GitHub repository is there in the description box. For this particular tutorial, I'm using setup_7 troubleshooting _event logging script. This is the setup script which is going to be installed within the native application. Whatever the SQL I'm using for the installation purpose and testing the application purpose, they are all present inside this folder test SQL. And here you can see there's this SQL file troubleshooting event SQL. Fine, it's time to move over to Snowsite. On Snowsite, you see two tabs. The first tab is connected to an account which I am considering as a provider account, and the second tab is connected to the consumer account. Let us connect to the native app developer role that has already been created, and we have already assigned the necessary privileges to this particular role. What are all those privileges? I have already talked about all those privileges in the previous videos. Please go and have a look out there if you have not done already. At this point of time, if I do show event tables, I think it is not going to show me anything because the event tables are supposed to be created and set at an account level, right? Let's go ahead and use the role account admin and then come back and look for event tables. I can see there are 3 event tables. The last one is a system event table. The first and the second one are the ones which I have already created. Now, if you remember from the presentation, we spoke about a very specific fact that there can be multiple event tables in an account. However, any one of them is supposed to be the primary one or the active one. In this particular case, if I go ahead and try to see the event table at an account level, it shows event_logging has already been set as the primary table. And how did I do that? It was done using the statement line number 17, alter account set event table equals to event_logging. I can also very well unset this. Let's go ahead and unset this and check what happens. At this point of time, if I again execute show parameters, I'm sure it is not going to show me anything. Let me set it again and let me see the parameters again. Fantastic. It is time for us to create the application, upload all the files and see the application in execution state. For that, we will have to go back to the native app developer role. I'm going to drop the application if it exists. The rest of the steps I'm going to run all at once. Creation of the application package, using the application package, creation of the schema, creation of a stage, and finally it will show me the stages. Great, the application stage has been created and now it is time to upload the manifest file and the setup file to the application stage. Let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go to the databases, do a refresh. I can see the package. Go here, stage content, go to stages, app underscore stage. Let me enable. I'm going to choose this. Now I'm not going to repeat what exactly we are doing out here to a greater detail, because this is a very typical process which we have been following from the first video onward, and if you have been following me throughout, I'm sure you have understood what is exactly going on in the background. If I go to native app building blocks, I'm going to upload the manifest file. I'm going to upload the readme file to the root location. I will also have to upload from scripts number 7, which is setup underscore 7 troubleshooting event log. This is supposed to go under scripts. Before we create the application out of it, let's go ahead and check the script once. What is the script doing? The script is creating a role, a schema, giving the necessary privileges to the role, create or replace stage. It's creating a stage, it's giving all the privileges to the stage, and finally it is creating a function. What is the function doing? The function on every invocation is going to write one log record onto the log file. Now in this case there is no log file, it is actually going to be redirected to the event table. So every execution of this particular function will result in one record being created in the event table. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and see this in action. Okay. As I was speaking earlier, all the SQL files, all the SQL code which have been used for the installation and testing purpose are there in this particular file, which is troubleshooting event logging.sql. This will also be uploaded onto the GitHub location. While you try to work on it, please ensure that you reclone the repository, because with every video I am refreshing the main branch of that particular repository. Fantastic. Let me go to this project. Okay, let's try to do a ls on the stage. We are all set. All the project files have already been uploaded to the stage app underscore stage. At this point of time, we are going to drop if the application already exists and we're going to create the application from the package itself. If you remember, the slide spoke about the fact that if you create an application directly from the application package, mentioning the stage name where all the code units are already uploaded, you are actually creating the application in the development mode. Let's go ahead and do it. I think it requires a warehouse. Let me point it to the warehouse, and I'm going to create the application. I'm going to create the application in the provider account itself because I first want to test it. Okay, the application has already been created. I'm going to refresh it. Yes, my application is already created. I'm going to test the app locally. Okay, let's go ahead and do a describe application, our first app. What do you see? Version is unversioned because I did not create a version. The log level is set to info. Okay, I missed to talk about a very interesting part. If I go back to my manifest file, you see that I have added 3 more lines to the YAML definition, which is the configuration, which talks about the trace level. For our example, it is off, and the log level as info. Now, this is the only way in which you can tweak the log level of an application. Had it been any other object, which is, let's say, a user-defined function or a procedure, you could have managed the log level from Snowsite itself. However, Snowsite doesn't allow you to change the log level of an application. The only way you can set the log level of an application is by changing the manifest file. This proves that the log level of the application has rightly been set. At this point of time, let me go back and query the log table once. Let's see what is there in the log table right now. It is not allowing me to query the log table. Why is it so? Okay, I know the reason. The reason is the log table is supposed to be queried by the account admin because it is created by the account admin, and I did not provide privileges to Native App Developer role to query the log table. Let's do that. Okay, the log table is empty. I'm going to switch back to Native App Developer role, and I'm going to execute the function. The moment I execute the function, it says it is success. So it is expected that at this point of time, one log entry would have been created in my event logging table, which is event_logging in the provider account itself. Please remember, we are still on the provider account, and we are trying to check that if the app, when executed in the development mode, is able to rightly log a record into the event table. What happens if I execute line number 98? I'm sure it is not going to work because DemoDB doesn't exist. So even if I do this, it is not going to work because I need to change my role to account admin. If I execute this, I should see one record. Yes, we are good. So the app, when executed in our development mode in the same account, has been able to insert one record onto my event table. Lovely. It's time to create a listing out of this app and install it in the consumer account. I'm going to go to Provider Studio, and I'm going to create a listing. Let's say our first app. It's going to be for a specific consumer. Application package, again our first app. I need to put the consumer account details. I've already copy pasted the consumer account details out here before starting the recording, and I'm going to paste it out here. Okay, publish. Please note both the consumer and the provider are a part of the same region. Okay, there's an error. Let's look at the error. This package doesn't seem to have a default version. Please set the default version before publishing. Yes. We need to go to applications, app packages, why am I not able to see the application version? Installed applications. Yes, go to my packages, add the first version. I'm going to name it version 1. Path is the root, and this is going to be my default version. Okay, we'll try to publish the package again. It directly takes to me to my provider studio. I'm going to mention our first app. Let me copy the ID of the consumer account. Quickly paste it, and we're good. Takes a little bit of time for the publishing to happen. It's done. Let me go back to my installed apps. I should see our first app coming up over here. It's time to install it. Yes, I'm going to install it, and it is getting installed as an account admin. Takes a little bit of time as usual. Fantastic. Let's go back to projects. Please note this app has been installed as an account admin. Now what we can do is we can go to this particular app, add necessary privileges to the native app consumer role on the installed application, and use native app consumer role. But just in the interest of time, we are not going to do it. We are going to continue testing it using account admin. Fantastic. Let's go ahead and describe the application. Our first app, you can see on the screen version 1 has been installed, and you can see the log level. Now this is a new account which I'm using as a consumer account. Let us see the condition of the logs here, log level here. Well, the condition of the log level is that it is set at info. We also have to check the event tables. Let's go to account admin, show event tables. Yes, the event table is already existing. Even here the name of the event table is event_logging. Let's query the event table. It's empty. So what we should do is we will have to execute the stored function to create an entry onto this event table. Right. If I do this, it is a success, and if I go to my event table right now, it takes a little bit of time. I have seen this because in the background Snowflake uses task and streams to write the logs from the objects from the Snowflake programmatic objects onto the event table in a periodic way. Maybe it creates some micro batches in the background. It's going to come in, right? We will come back and check it, but before that we will have to go back to the provider account and check how do we ensure that the data sharing takes place or the event sharing takes place. Let's go back to the package. I'll go to project. Now here is something very interesting. For the first time we are going to use org admin. Now what I've done is, on this particular account I have enabled org admin for the user Ritab. So I'm going to use org admin. Now if I use org admin, if I do show organization accounts, it's going to list out all the accounts which comes under this organization. Now if you're very new to Snowflake and you have no idea about what an organization means, I would sincerely request you to go back to the documentation and spend a few minutes to understand what an organization means. I'm not going to get into that particular discussion in the interest of time in this particular video. Maybe I'll come back again and talk about organization at a later date. At this point of time, I'm going to talk about this particular function, show event sharing accounts. Now this is what happens. In a particular organization there can be multiple provider accounts, but all the provider accounts need not be eligible for event sharing. If you have to enable a provider account as an event sharing account, you will have to elevate that particular provider account as an event sharing account. Now in a particular organization there can be multiple provider accounts. Every provider account can be a part of an event sharing account. However, few provider accounts may not be event sharing accounts. Okay. Now the moment I execute this particular store procedure, you will call this store procedure, you will see a bunch of functions, a bunch of accounts being highlighted as event sharing accounts, and this particular account is one of them. You see number 1, you see number 2, and number 3 is actually the account which we are currently working on. So that means in this particular organization there are 3 provider accounts which have been elevated as event sharing accounts. Now there can be many other providers which I don't care about. Let's go back to my consumer. Yes, you can see the record is available out here. Now in case the event sharing account has not been set, how do you set it? You set it by using this stored procedure which says set event sharing account for the region. It takes 3 parameters. The first one is your region, the second one is your public region, and the third one is your account name. While you are looking at this video, I might have masked all these details because of sensitivity reasons, but then if you go back to the documentation, which I will leave a link in the description box, you will see the signature of all these stored procedures very clearly. We did see how the consumer was able to generate the logs and the consumer was able to see the logs at the consumer log table itself. Let me run this particular statement again, line number 10, and I could see that. Now let's take a scenario wherein the provider has requested the consumer that, hey, Mr. Consumer, please share your logs with me so that I can understand what is going on in your application. Or maybe the consumer would have reported some kind of a fault in the application during the process of execution and the consumer is not able to debug it. The provider needs to understand what exactly is going on the consumer account, and that is the reason why the consumer will have to share the consumer logs with the provider. Now this happens with the tweak of a parameter. Now the consumer needs to set that parameter to true for the provider to receive the logs. Now this is very sensitive because many consumers may not want to do it and many consumers may have different reasons for doing it or not doing it, right? So on line number 23 you see that there's a parameter called set events with the provider equals to true, and this is the parameter with which the consumer can control whether the logs will be shared with the provider or not. All right, now let me remind you that Sharing of logs is not retrospective. Sharing of the log always initiates from the time this parameter is set to true. That means any log which is generated after this parameter is set to true will be shared with the provider, and anything before that will not be done. So let's go ahead and execute this, and I'm going to execute this stored procedure once more to create one more log. Okay, so the log has been generated. Now, as in the previous case also, we saw that it takes a little bit of time for the log to pop up on the log table, and I'm sure it is going to take a little longer than that for the log to be shared with the provider. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video a little bit over here, and we'll come back when the records are available in the provider screen. I'm back after a minute or so. Let me go ahead and execute the select statement on the log table on the consumer screen, and I can see that yes, the logs are visible out here. It was generated just a while ago. I'm expecting that the log would have already been created in the provider studio as well. I have executed it, and yes, I can see that this particular log has popped up here, the last one, TRB, and the rest of the digits. This is the one, this is the log which has traveled all the way from the provider account to the, it has traveled all the way from the consumer account to the provider account. Fair enough. This shows how we can share a log from the consumer to the provider. Now it's time to look at the second part of the video, where we are going to deep dive on how do we actually install an application in the debug mode. If you remember, while we were going through the presentation, I called out that the moment you are installing an application on the provider itself, which we have done in the beginning, right? When we have done it, we called out that yes, this is in the development mode. Now we will have to toggle between the debug mode and the development mode. I'm on the provider window. Now this particular app, our first app, has already been installed in the development mode on the provider window. Now we got this installed in the beginning of the video. If you are joining in the middle of the session, kindly go back and see how did we get it installed in the development mode, right? Now if I do a describe application, I should be able to see the mode. Give me a moment. I am not able to see. Yeah, you see, debug mode. Debug mode is false. Now, I have a select statement out here. What am I doing? I am querying this app. Let me change the name of the app. Our first app, stage content dot app stage. Now, if you remember, we uploaded all our code content, the README file, the manifest file, and this setup.script, right? Those three files have already been uploaded into this stage, app.stage. But me as a consumer, can I see it? No, because this is the proprietary code artifact of the provider. Now if I execute this stage statement, select star from stage, I'm not able to see it because it is still in the development mode. Development mode is very similar to the state of the application when it is installed on the consumer end. So I'm not able to see it out here. Now I need to set it to a debug mode. If I switch over to debug mode, see the difference? I'll be able to see the data. Yes, this is how you as a developer is empowered to look into the state of the application when you switch to a debug mode. Now please remember, debug mode is only possible when you install the application on the provider account itself in the development mode, right? If I do a describe application again, what do I see? The debug mode is true right now. If I set it to false, I'll not be able to explore the stage content. This is just an example of how do you look into your stage. If you are having any data proprietary to the provider, this is the way you can explore what is the state of that particular data set using the debug mode, right? It's very, very handy and helps you to understand the state of an application during the course of an application execution. Fine. This brings to the end of this exciting video. I hope you have liked it, and if you have really been benefited by the content, please hit the like button. Thank you and have a wonderful time until we meet in the next lecture. Bye-bye.